Hi guys, we're going to continue today looking in Unit 11. We're skipping a few lessons in there, but we are continuing looking at things like data, but up till now we've looked at things like a box and whisker plot. We've looked at things like a stem and leaf plot. We've looked at a line graph. And these all are unique, not unique, these are all similar, there we go, in the sense that they only have one variable that we're considering. We're only measuring the height of somebody, or we're only measuring the amount of time it takes to complete an assignment. Today we're going to look at something that now requires two variables. So something like height and weight. Time it takes to complete an assignment and the grade they get on it. And we're going to look at how to compare two variables. And one of the best way to do that is through a scatter plot. So a scatter plot is a graph that relates two sets of data instead of the one we've been doing up till now. To make a scatter plot, we're going to plot the two sets of data as ordered pairs. We're going to write them in this form where, remember, we have like X and Y, and we're going to plot them on a graph. And a scatter plot must always include a title, so this is the first thing that we put on there, labels, and consistent numbering. And we'll talk about each of those as we go through. So this would be an example of a scatter plot. Notice that they have a title, and there are labels on each of the axes. They're telling us on this horizontal axis we're measuring process input. We don't really need to know what that is for this. I'm just showing you an example. On this axis, they're measuring quality characteristic X. And then notice that along the horizontal, they're counting by fives. This is an interval of 5, 5, 5, 5. Along here, granted, they should, this is probably zoomed in, but like we could put a line break in there. But there's an interval of 2, 2, 2, 2. So they're counting by consistent numbers. These are all the important things that we need to include on our scatter plots. So we are going to jump right in. Elizabeth is investigating the relationship between the number of credit cards a person has and the amount of credit card debt. So how many cards do you have and how much debt? So we're going to say, I'm going to call this credit cards and debt. You can call it whatever you like, but it should involve kind of what we're measuring. I usually just kind of put the two things that we're relating. The first column is always the horizontal axis, just like before. We did this in the graphing unit. Horizontal axis is for the first column, vertical axis for the second column. So I'm going to label my axes. This is going to be the number of credit cards. And the vertical axis is going to be the amount of debt. All right, and just like before, our graph always starts at 0. And then we need to decide what to count by. Well, if I look at my first column, I'm going from 1 to 5. So I can just count by ones, and I could do it, don't write anything yet, I could do it like this if I wanted, but that's going to put things really, oops, I skipped the number 4, that's embarrassing. I can put them together, but that's going to make things really squished, so I'm actually going to space them out a little more. I'm going to give each one, it's like a space in between. But notice that I'm being consistent. I'm not going to suddenly put a 4 here. Nope, it still needs a space. So I'm putting 4 here and 5 here. Now, the y-axis is going to be a little trickier. I need to get from 0 all the way to 19,000. So, obviously I'm not going to count by ones. I'm not even going to count by 100. I think I will count by, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That works out perfect. There's 19 squares, so I'm going to count by 1,000s. And then I do not have to label every single one. I usually label about every, like the 5,000 and 10,000. So this is 1,000, 2, 3, 4, 5,000. This is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,000. This is 16, 17, 18, and then I'll put a 19 on the last one. All right, so now I have to think of these as ordered pairs. So I'm going to write them as ordered pairs. Remember that this is my horizontal or my x value. This is my vertical or my y value. So I've got the 0.10, 0.1, 1,000, 1, 5,000, and I'm going to continue this all the way down. Ta-da! There's all my values. If you need to pause it and catch up, you can. But I'm going to go ahead and graph these. So I've got the 0.10. So I'm going to go over 1 on the x-axis. If you need to label them x and y to remind yourself, you can. So I'm going to go over 1 and up to 1,000, which in this case is just right here. Oh, sorry, 10 is what I'm graphing first. But then I've also got the 0.1, 1,000, which would go there. I've got 1, 5,000. 2, I'm moving over to 2. I've got 3,000 and 5,000. 3 goes up to 10, and down to 5, and then back up to 8. 4 goes to 10,000, and 5 goes all the way up to 19,000. And this time, our line is, there's not going to be one clear, solid, obvious line that goes through it. We won't really talk about that, but what we can see, well, we'll talk about that more later. We should see kind of a pattern happening, though, and we can see what's happening with the credit curves. All right, so pause the video, put down those 3 important things, and write your ordered pairs, and then come back and check and see if you got all 3 important things that you have to include on a scatter plot. All right, so do a quick check. The things that you should have on here are, where's my pen? You should have your title, you should have your labels, and you should have consistent numbering, which I started here on the x-axis, but I haven't done the y-axis because I wanted to discuss that together. Now, we have scores ranging from a 98 down to a 68. And so when I'm thinking about numbering, the reason I cannot just start here and put, oh, look, let's just do 68, 70, 72, I cannot do that without something special. The reason is because then it would be saying to get from here to here is 68, but then to get from here to here is 2. It's not consistent numbering. So I have 2 options. The one that I would really like to, I'll talk about one first and then I'll talk about the one that I prefer for us to do. One is to use that line break, and we've talked about that, where I put a line break and then I just start counting like at 68, 70, 72, etc. I don't like doing that so much because I think it can be a little misleading on our graph. So instead, I would rather go ahead and count by the same interval. And in this case, I'm going to count by 10s. So I'm going to, or sorry, by 5s, but I'm going to label every 10. So this, from here to here is 5, and then 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, and then 100 would actually be up here off the graph, and that's okay. So, what we have now is to write the ordered pairs. So pause this, write your ordered pairs, and then come back and check. So this is what our ordered pairs would look like, and I'm going to graph them now. So I've got 198, and that is going to go a little off the graph in this case, and that's all right. We're going to make the most of it. So then we've got 186. So here's 85, would be just past that. 2 and 90. 282. 285. 379. 373, 375, 462, and then 568. No, this doesn't mean, I've already watched 4 hours, I should watch 5 more and I'll get a 6% better score. That is not what we can take away from this. So here's what our scatter plot would look like. And you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points here. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points here. You should always have the same number of points on your graph as you do values. All right, pause, check this whole problem. I'm going to do the whole problem, and then when you come back, you can check your answer with mine. So check along at home. Do you have your title? And again, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. I just put practice and free throws, but it should talk about what is this graph describing. You can't just name your graph like Jim. You have to give it a title that relates to what's happening here. Did you label both of your axes? Hours of practice, free throws made, horizontal column, vertical column. Did you label something consistent? I just counted by ones both here and here. I only labeled every 2. You could put like 1 and then label every 5. It's up to you. Did you write your values here as an ordered pair? And then did you put those on the graph? Your graph should have a look like this. If you used a different scale to count by, it might look a little different, but it should have the generally same shape. All right, so interpreting scatter plots. Scatter plots are useful for looking for trends or relationships in 2 sets of data. And so a scatter plot has a positive trend if as one set of values increases. So as one increases, the other increases. So in the x direction, this is increasing, y direction, this is increasing. So it should look as my x is increasing, my y is also increasing, like this. So then it says it's a negative if as one set, like the x is increasing, the y is decreasing, or the other set decreases. So as to make that happen, it would look like this. And there would be no trend if the points show no relationship. If there's not a pretty clear line going one way or the other. So these would be a couple of examples. This one here would be a positive trend, a negative trend, and then this one would be no trend. And these are just general examples again. Look at the graph from example 1. Does it show a positive or negative trend? How do you know? So let's see. Example 1. If I look at this, my points generally, I know that this line doesn't go through all of them, but it generally is going up. And so that would mean that there is a positive trend. And I would say as, what values are we using again? Let's look at our axis. As the number of credit cards increases, the amount of debt increases. So we would say as the number of credit cards, I'm going to abbreviate it to CC for time's sake. As the number of credit cards increases, the amount of debt increases. So that's part A. Part B says, describe the relationship Elizabeth likely found between the number of credit cards and the amount of debt. So this is the explaining how we know, but basically it's saying, tell Elizabeth what the relationship is. So generally speaking, we would say the more credit cards you have, the more credit cards you have, the more debt you have. Look at the graph from example 2. Does it show a positive or negative trend, and how do you know? So if we look at, here we go. If I draw a line through it, generally speaking, from left to right, it's going to go down. Again, doesn't pass through all the points, but that's okay. So if I look at this one, I would say negative. Our how do you know then could look something like this. As the hours of TV watched per day increases, the test score decreases. Notice I'm talking about both of the axes. And describe the relationship William likely found between the test scores and TV time. This could be something like the more TV you watch, the lower your test score is going to be. Something generic like that would be okay.